And now for another exciting episode of Brett mumbling to himself. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I've been riding colts all day, but there's a storm brewing in, and heard some thunder, and that never used to bother me one little bit at all. And I always kind of made fun of the people that did, but here quite recently, a close friend of mine was killed by a lightning strike. So it's got me just a hair spooked. And being as I'm new to this part of the world, I can't really figure the weather patterns yet. So I decided I would have a cup of coffee and sit on the porch and look at this for a little while and think about it and see what the next plan is. But while I was going to do that, figured it'd been a while since I'd done one of these talking to myself episodes, so I thought I'd use my time wisely and try to do that. But I'm going to talk to myself anyway, so y'all may as well hear it. What's on my mind is I've been recently, well, this kind of goes way back. Years ago when Benny Catrone was sick, his best friend and my good friend, Billy Arthur. Billy went out there and lived with him for the last year or two that Benny was around, and he kept telling me, hey, you ought to come stay with us for a while. You ought to come stay with us for a while. And I didn't know Benny all that well, but I'd been around him a little bit. And I kept saying, oh, yeah. Yeah, as soon as I get done with this set of colts, I'll come stay with you guys for a week. On and on. Long story short, I never did. And then Benny went ahead and died. And so I made it a point, and I'm still not very good at it, but I'm better at it. I made it a point to try to visit those old guys, at least call them pretty often, but go and visit them and stay with them when I can. And like I said, I'm not real good at it, but I tried to. And so here, just a little while back, the producer and I, we were talking about it is going to rain, by golly. All the people that had helped us along the way and this and that. And she said, you really ought to do some of these episodes where you just talk about the people that helped you and just honor them. And all the people I'm going to talk about, the vast majority of them I never really thanked. And it's not so much that I was an ungrateful punk as that I was always just so dang bad to drift that, I'd hit a new trail and disappear and just never see them again. But I think of them and remember them, and remember the things they taught me. Shoot, I'm even getting rained on the porch. Damn sideways Texas rain. So anyway, the very first one that comes to mind, and for no particular reason whatsoever, he's just the first one that comes to mind, is Wilson Pate. And Wilson is, I don't recall now, either the uncle or the brother, I think the brother, to Kurt Pate. Kurt's a pretty famous horseman, pretty darn good horseman. His daughter Mesa puts on that part of the cowgirl deal. And I didn't figure all that. I never realized they were all part of the same family till years later. But I was around Wilson when I was in my early teens. And he was a wild, he was in his 50s at that point. And he was a wild, rough, tough, crash and mash cowboy. And he was just one of those things. He was everything I ever wanted to be. Which maybe wasn't the best idea I ever had, but Wilson was also very kind and very nice to me as a kid. And what got me thinking about him, or I guess just the thing I remember the most about him, is I was starting a colt, and I was fiddling around. I'd just kind of been introduced to join up, and I was kind of playing with that. And Wilson says, "What in the hell are you doing?" And I said, "Groundwork." And I was pretty new to groundwork. And he said, "Groundwork? I'll show you how to groundwork." And he kind of shoved me aside, and he grabbed that colt, and he hobbled him, and saddled him. And then he says, now take the hobbles off and get on, because that's all the work you got to do on the ground. And so that was Wilson's version of groundwork, and it stuck with me for a long, long time. That was my version of groundwork too. But that was Wilson. And I guess the way I got to know him was through Tony Dura. And Tony Dura and Donnie Kish and John Growney are all kind of shirt tail relatives. And if y'all don't know who those guys are, John Growney was a big time rodeo contractor in Red Bluff, California. I believe he's retired now. But the famous bull Red Rock that belonged to John had a lot of bulls and horses that went to the NFR. Tony, I believe, was his cousin. He is his cousin. These guys are all still alive. And I believe Don is cousins with him too. Anyway, Tony and Don just raised bulls for the most part. And I mean, rank bulls. Really, really, really good bucking bulls. A lot of them in the NFR, a lot of them in the PBR. And not just when the PBR was young, when it was, well, it's still going big guns. But even in the time when it was going big guns, they had a lot of bulls in that PBR. And Tony was kind of a bull whisperer, I think. He was funny, those old bulls. He was just so quiet and easy around them, and they were just so quiet and easy around him, and they just worked so good with him. And, you know, they load him in the bull wagon to go to a rodeo, and they loaded in order. They had their order that they were supposed to get. You didn't have to sort them or anything. They'd just get in the way they were supposed to. It was really neat. And then Donnie had some really good bulls too. And I wasn't around Don near as much. But anyway, with the way it all came to pass is another Tony, another friend of mine. His name's Tony Scott. He's from Klamath Falls, Oregon, and I kind of grew up with the Scott clan. And they were like any family. They put the fun in dysfunctional. But if you were part of the tribe, you were part of the tribe, even if they knew you were wrong, they had your back. Tony's younger brother, Luke rode broncs a little bit, but I mean, he'd fight a buzzsaw just to prove a point. And I know when Antifa pulled into Klamath Falls a couple of years ago, Luke was standing on the steps of City Hall wearing a kilt and an AC/DC shirt and a sombrero and holding a shillelagh, and he was just absolutely tickled to death about those riders wanting to get off the bus. I think he's probably one of the main reasons they didn't get off the bus at Klamath. So anyway, I run around with the Scott clan quite a little bit, and Tony's several years older than me. And Tony was a bullfighter, and a dang good bullfighter, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best. Bullfighter, and he was also a drummer. Played drums for Brooks and Dunn and a number of other big acts. And it, in the end, was kind of the undoing of him, because he was sort of trying to serve two masters, and he was either late for a rodeo or late for a concert. And, finally had to pick. Last time I talked to him, he was just working on a ranch outside of Klamath. Happy as if he had good sense, and I know dang good and well he doesn't. But anyway, he was, one of the contracts he had was working for Dura and Kish and Growney's as a bullfighter. And they were complaining that they couldn't get anybody to get on their tryout bulls, and they couldn't get anybody to get on their A-string bulls. You know, once those bulls have had a winter off, you need somebody to hop on them and uncork them once or twice before you take them to the big show. And there was a lot of kids around that claimed they wanted to be bull riders, but they didn't want to get on rank bulls. You know, every bull rider says they want to get on rank bulls, but most of them don't really. And so they'd set up a practice deal, and they couldn't get anybody to come to it, and they even offered to pay them guys. Couldn't get anybody to get on them. And anyway, so Tony Dura was saying something to Tony Scott about that, and Tony Scott says, well, I know a kid get on anything with a heartbeat. And so he pulled in one day and said, grab your stuff. Away we went to Red Bluff, and I spent 3 days there, and if I recall, I believe I got on every bull that Dura's owned in 3 days. And rank ones from the PBR, tryout bulls. He had a pet bull called Bandit that they did a lot of commercials and stuff with. Heck, I rode him. I just rode everything I could get near. And so Tony Dura, he was tickled with that. And the tryout bull deal, tryout stock in general, that's, trying out to see if they have potential to be bucking stock. And so tryout stock's pretty dangerous because you don't know what they're going to do. They may run out there and get scared and run off, crash into something, especially bucking horses, tryout horses. They may crash into something or try to jump out of the pen. Sometimes those bulls run off, and then you're really in danger, because if you jump off, then you're out in the middle where it's dangerous. They may just go and just get after it right there in the gate latch. They may jump out there and flip over. Like, you just never know. And so anybody that's got any brains, you can usually get a kid to do it a couple times, and anybody that's got any brains wises up. I didn't have any brains, and I was just happy to get on stuff. So anyway, Dura told Kish about that. So they asked me to come down again. I wasn't old enough to drive. I think I was 13. And so Phoenix is right on I-5, and Red Bluff's right on I-5. So I just told them to pick me up at such and such truck stop, and I went down to the truck stop, hitchhiked to Red Bluff. And then that was just, I'd go down there pretty often. That was how I went down there. And I either have the coolest parents in the world or the worst ones. I don't even know if they knew what I was up to. But that's what I was doing, was hitchhiking with truckers to Red Bluff. And I never once had anything bad happen, or even kind of sort of bad happen, which is good, because I was so dumb I wouldn't have known it if it was, but until it was too late. But anyway, that's what I did until... later on, Tony's wife, Linda, she took a lot of good care of me when I was a kid. Linda caught wind of what I was doing, and so everybody got a pretty good butt chewing over that. Me and all the men and everybody got a pretty good chewing over that. She made them start buying me a bus ticket. So then I rode Greyhound, and I don't know that was necessarily any better, but kept Linda from being mad at us. So I was going down there pretty often, getting on the tryout stock, or giving the A string kind of a, it kind of gives them bulls a confidence booster to just absolutely massacre, fling buck off a kid. I was a pretty good bull rider, but I was only 14. I just wasn't strong enough to ride those big bulls, and so it makes those big bulls feel pretty good. And then, the next weekend they'd go to a PBR or something, and they'd buck really good. And that was cool as a kid to be able to watch, Ty Murray get on something that I'd been on the weekend before. That's where I was going with that. So then Groundy catches wind of it. And like I said, they're all shirt-tail relatives of some kind. And so he asked if I'd get on bucking horses, because it's even harder to get people to get on tryout horses. And so they said, well, I don't know. Said he'd ride anything with heartbeat. We'll ask him. So I said, absolutely. And so then I'd go down there and I'd get on tryout horses and old bucking horses and new bucking horses and bulls and cows and anything else. And those three guys, they thought that was just so cool that I'd ride anything. So they came up with all kinds of stupid stuff for me to try to do. And also had me as part of the clown act in a lot of deals. I'd ride a bull in a wash basin. We'd strap it to his back, and I'd strip down to my skivvies and ride him while I was taking him back. Just dumb stuff like that. So I did that for quite a little while, and then Hemsteads heard about me. And they asked if they could borrow me. And so the Hemsteads, as a tribe, as a family, are wild. I don't know if there's any of them left. I know Flint died a couple of years ago, and he might have been the last one. but they're wild. Shoot each other, did a lot of stuff that they weren't supposed to do, and their bulls were too. Their bulls were terrible. I mean, they'd buck, but they were hooky, mean, miserable little SOBs. Fight you in the buck and shoot. And most of them wouldn't buck at all. They'd just run off, try to hook you off their back until they figured out that once you were off, they could hook you. And so then they'd go bucking. So the Hemsteads borrowed me for a little while, and they liked me, and I liked them. I thought that looked like a good way to live my life. And they invited me to come live with them, and I was going to, and Tony and John said, no. Can't do that. And, they saved my life doing that. I was a little upset because I liked Tony and John, but they were fun, but they were kind of old fuddy-duddies compared to the Hemstead Bunch. But it's, like I said, they dang sure saved my life by not letting me do that. But anyway, those are all guys I just learned a lot from. Wilson and Tony and John. And like I said, I wasn't around Don Kish all that much. He was kind of crabby. I got on a lot of his bulls. But just learned a lot from those guys. They just showed me besides little rodeo secrets, and they showed me a lot of life secrets and a lot of tricks to get through this world. A lot of ways to do things right. Just awful thankful for the time I was around them. Another person I'd like to talk about a little that helped me along the way. I don't know how she'll cut this up. Make it a series or whatever. She does the important part. I just talk. But guy that meant a lot to me at one time and then has had a big impact on my career. It's Tom Hagwood. And I don't remember how old I was when I went to work for Tom. It was when I first moved to Nevada, and I was rodeoing a lot, and I had a horse. That's how the whole deal started. I had a horse, my own blue roan horse, and I asked Tom if we could make a little trade because I didn't have anywhere to keep the horse or something like that. I asked if I could trade him for board. I'd clean stalls or ride colts or do whatever. And so what he did actually is he one-upped me and said I could keep 2 horses there on his bill, and then he'd pay me however much a ride. I don't remember how much a ride to ride a bunch of these young horses. And I said, well, but I don't know how reliable I can be because I'm rodeoing and trying to day work a little and this and that. And, I don't know how long how much I'll be around. And he said, look at it this way. You don't work for me, you work for you. So the days you come and ride, I'll pay you. And the days you don't, I'll just ride them myself. And I said, okay, made a deal with him. And so then I was with Tom for, I don't know, probably 9 months. I think. Of course, I was kind of in and out, rodeoing and crashing around and doing a lot of dumb stuff. At the time, that was in Fallon, and at the time I had a girlfriend in Reno. And so a lot of times I'd spend all night there and then drive the hour to Fallon at daylight or whatever. I'd come rolling in, and Tom would say, you look like you got shot at and missed and shit at and hit. But anyway, I learned a lot from Tom, and Tom, I don't know if he's like this with everybody or he's always been like this, but he'd just talk and talk and talk and talk. And he called me the human sponge because he'd just tell me what he was doing on a horse and why and what he was feeling and where he was trying to move stuff around and why. And I just soaked it all in. And he's where I really understood, really started. I still don't. I wouldn't say that I've got it figured out yet, but he's where I really started to understand about getting their body broke. Up until then, it was just kind of turn their head where I wanted and kick on the other side. And they'll go that way. Turn their head to the right, kick with the left foot, they'll go to the right. And Tom's one who showed me that you've got to get their body broke to where you can put any piece of it anywhere you want at any time. And kind of where I've come up with the slogan, I guess you'd say, that, a broke horse is one that can go stop turn. A colt goes stop and turn. A broke horse can go stop turn anytime, any place, at any speed. That's really where I started piecing that theory together. I was living there with Tom and working with him, and of course we did a lot of ridiculous stuff too. I mean, had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot from him. But one of the funniest things I think that we did, or the funnest things we did, is we had buffalo instead of cattle to work. And there was a time when a lot of the cutters and almost all the cow horse guys were all about buffalo. And the reason is because they don't get sour. Eventually they do, actually, but it takes a while. You can work buffalo for a couple of years before it'll get sour. And they don't get sour and cheat you like a cow will. They'll just keep working. Unfortunately, the thing about a buffalo versus a cow is they turn different. So you can get your horse real broke to that buffalo, and then you put him in front of a cow, and they move different. And so that's kind of why it phased out, and people didn't quit using them. And plus, they're a pain in the ass. Buffalo are. And so the popularity has waned significantly. But at the time, we had buffalo there and a bunch of yearlings. And Tom's deal was, he, like I said, you do eventually wear those buffalo out. And he'd use them up till they were too big and no good, and then trade them to some of these buffalo ranches that would sell hunts, which is hilarious. Sell a hunt on a broke buffalo. Sell hunts, and they'd trade him a bunch of yearlings. So we had, if I recall, we had either 4 or 6 yearling buffalo. It doesn't matter how many we had, but we had a handful, and we had one little bitty guy, and I called him Chico, the king of the yearlings, just because he kind of thought he was big time, even though he was a little bitty guy. And so what he must have done one night is he must have got to, and he was bull, he must have got to bulling around a couple of them other buffaloes, and he got hooked real bad and cut him up real bad. And so, of course, Tom and I, being cowboys, we decided we were going to doctor this buffalo. We didn't have to shoot or anything like that. But Tom had a big old neat bridle horse that come out of McCurkey-August. He called him Claude or Clyde. I don't remember. But big old black son of a gun. That was just a neat horse. And so what we did was, they say you can't rope a buffalo because it'll break their windpipe and they'll die. And that's not true. I've seen a lot of guys do it. I've done it myself. But what we did is we got him in the round pen, and Tom heeled him and jerked him down, and I pounced on him and got a halter on his head somehow, tie halter, and then I got him, while he was still down, I got him tied off to the fence, and then once he was good and tied off the fence, Tom let him up and let him slip one leg, and he kept the other leg and stretched him out, and then I doctored him. And so that's how we doctored him, because Tom had him stretched out by one leg so he couldn't kick me. He'd kind of waller around and step on me a little bit, but he couldn't do much. And so we doctored him every day and got to where we'd give him a pan of grain when we'd doctor him. And even though it sounds like what we were doing was pretty rough and rowdy way of doing it, it really wasn't. Tom's super smooth. You can say anything you want about him, but he's damn sure a good hand. And he's just smooth and easy about how he does stuff that buffalo got gentle. He didn't get wild or tough to be around. He got gentle. I'd just go in there every day, and I'd give him his pan of grain. And when he got done eating, Tom would rope a hind leg on him. And that buffalo got to, once that hind leg was roped, he wasn't going to fight it. And I could just walk in, grab him by the lead rope, and tie him to the post, and doctor him. And so this went on for however long. We had him about doctored. And Tom said, this is probably the last day. I said, yeah, I think we're about done. I said, I got one more thing I want to do. Just keep him held up. Tom says, all right. So I went in the saddle house and got my colt starting saddle. And I came back out, and I thought Tom was going to bust in half. He got to laughing so hard. He said, you got to be kidding me. And I said, no, come on. And we'd started a lot of colts that way with Tom roping a hind leg on the colts. And they can't do much, you know. You got to really trust your guy on the rope. But about all they can do is kind of bounce around. So I saddled old Chico, and he wasn't real keen on that, and he bellered and laid down. Anyway, I got him saddled, and with the hind legs stretched out and it's still tied to the fence, I stepped on him and kind of wallered around there and this and that, and then I just leaned over, and I had a slip knot tied, and leaned over and slipped that off, and so we were loose. And for a minute there, it's kind of like a fart in a skillet. I mean, we just ping ponged around there. But like I said, Tom's dang sure handy. And he kind of kept everything together. And then wasn't just a minute, we were just trotting around in that round pen. And then he had it built to where you could open that round pen right into the arena. And so we piddled around the arena there. And then we went outside. We actually went down the irrigation ditch. Trotted down the irrigation ditch. Me riding buffalo. And Tom behind me. It's a good thing we didn't have any neighbors. And so anyway, I had this big plan. I was going to get this buffalo broke to where I could take him to horse shows so that before the cow work, people could pay me $20 or whatever, and they could warm their horse up on a broke buffalo, and I could, turn the way they wanted to. I never did get the son of a gun broke. I got him where I could ride him, and I could go catch him and saddle him and ride him, but he went wherever he felt like going, at whatever speed he felt like going, fast or slow. I never really did get him where you could steer him much. I'd pack a broomstick around, and I could whack him with a broomstick and turn him, but that's about all the more broke I got him. And then the story of my life, I got an itch, and disappeared somewhere. I don't remember where I went. But that was kind of funny. I guess the whole reason I want to make time to talk about the people that help me in this world is because the greatest honor in my life, I think, is when a good friend of mine, his name's BJ, when he called me and asked if I'd take his son for the summer. And I had that boy for 3-4 summers in a row before he was grown up. And to me, just the honor of a dad saying, because you ladies may not know about this, but all the men know it. At some point, you can't learn anything from your dad, no matter how much he knows. You got to learn it from somebody else. And so, just the honor of being the guy that got picked. I'm just so thankful for that experience, and that boy and I were still really close. So that's why I just want to thank the guys that did the same thing for me. And it wasn't all guys. There was a lot of women that helped me out too, and I'll talk about them as time goes by. One of the guys, and this is from way back, when I was probably 11, 12 years old. His name was Jeff Ball. And Jeff was kind of a strange man. He'd been a cowboy some, and he'd guided and packed a lot. He'd been a miner. He'd been a roughneck. He was just one of those guys that kind kind of done a little bit of everything. And I think he was about half the time full of it. But I still really enjoyed being around him, and I learned a lot from him. Learned a lot about how my saddle fits. And to this day, I do a couple of little things that he showed me when I saddle a horse. He taught me a lot about how to treat people. And he really taught me a lot about how to express yourself, how to make yourself clear to people when you're talking. I'm maybe not very good at it, but whatever good I am at it, a lot of it came from him. But the little story I'll share about Jeff, like I said, I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, and it was a hot, hot, hot day, and we were shoeing horses. I learned a lot about shoeing horses from Jeff as well. It was a hot, hot, hot day, and we were shoeing horses, and he stepped out of the barn for a minute, and he came back in, and he says, "Let's have this little break." And I said, "Okay." And on the anvil, he set down a 6-pack of Modelo Negro. And he cracked one open and handed it to me. And of course, when you're a little boy and you've got a grown man that you really look up to, hand you your first beer, like that's a pretty big day in your life. And I'd tasted beer before. I really didn't like it, and I really didn't want this one. But I wasn't gonna say no. I was a man. But I took a big long drink of that ice cold Modelo Negro, and I have loved that stuff ever since. That is just the finest. You only want one or two. And every time I have one now, I think of Jeff. And then Jeff's wife was a gal named Marina. And Marina was the cook for that ranch. And she was big and loud and happy all the time and beautiful. And it's a funny deal. She was born and raised in Alaska to Mexican parents. So it was kind of a strange dichotomy there. But I was the wrangle boy for that place. And the wrangle boy wrangles horses in the morning and then kind of does whatever everybody else doesn't want to do the whole rest of the time. And so usually the wrangle boy goes and gathers the horses before breakfast, so I always missed breakfast. And Marina was always sure to, as I was coming back in with the horses, to hand me a breakfast burrito as I went by. And she made homemade refried beans with lard. And they were so good. I can taste them to this day. I wish I could have another one of those. It's ruined me on breakfast burritos for the rest of my life. Scrambled eggs and sausage, and homemade refried beans, and green salsa. They were fantastic. And they were so big that as a little boy, I generally didn't need to eat the whole rest of the day. That was about all I needed. But she'd make sure I always had one of those. So anyway, she being Mexican and me being from Phoenix, Oregon, and the whole rest of this ordeal being in Wyoming, she and I were the only ones that spoke Spanish, so we had a heck of a good time teasing each other and making fun of everybody else in Spanish because they couldn't understand what we were saying. That's, I guess, all I have to say about that. I'd like to see Marina again one of these days. Alright, so this is the last one for today because the lightning quit lightning and it's bright and beautiful outside and I better go ride some horses, but I'll just talk about this guy for a minute. His name is Merlin Rupp. And like I've said, I was always so bad to drift around that a lot of these people that were influential to me, I wasn't around for very long, or even some of them that I was around for quite a bit longer, I'd just up and leave and I never saw them again. Merlin was one I always kind of kept track of and kept pretty good contact with, to some extent. He appreciated that I was pretty drifty, and so he was always, because he'd been that way, and so he was always interested in where I was and what I was doing. But I used to call him pretty often, talk to him, and right before he died, I know he was real sick. I asked his daughter if I should come up and see him, and she said no, he didn't want to see anybody anymore. But she appreciated it, and she'd tell him that I was thinking of him, and then she contacted me and said that he said he sure appreciated knowing that I was thinking about him. So that helps me, I guess. But I first met Merlin, I was working for Matt Carter at Crown Cattle Company in Bear Valley, Oregon. And Matt had gone out of his way to really, really make friends with Merlin, just because he was this old legendary cowboy. And I was pretty arrogant, pretty vain at that time, and so I didn't really know who he was or really care. But just being around him, he was one of those guys you just really enjoyed being around. And so I got to be around him quite a little bit. I wished more, but quite a little bit. I'm not going to take the time to share all the stories about him, all the things we talked about, or different things he'd showed me, or things like that. I'll just go with this one. We'd gathered a whole bunch of cows, and I don't remember what class of cattle they were or anything like that, but we needed to sort them. So we held them up and sorted them, and Merlin picked the absolute, as far as I was concerned, worst possible spot to sort them that I could think of, or it looked like that he could think of. And what it was a flat spot, but it had been burned off at one point, and this is in Oregon, so this is in the pine forest. It had been burned off in this flat spot, and then either replanted or had planted itself back. And there was a whole bunch of little big pine trees that were right about hip height if you were horseback. And when I say a whole bunch, I mean a whole bunch, to the point where you couldn't really hardly see the cattle, and couldn't really see where you needed to be or what you were supposed to do, and couldn't maneuver around very good. And truth is, I was mad. Why in the hell are we doing this here? And so we sorted and sorted and sorted and sorted. It seemed like it took forever. And Merlin always rode at least any time I was around him, rode a dirty, nice red roan bridle horse. Or is he bay roan? I don't recall. But he was big, and he was snorty, and he was a broke sucker. And so about all you could see was Merlin moving around. He was doing everything. The rest of us were just holding herd, and I have that in air quotes because, couldn't hardly see the herd we were holding. And had it just about down to where everything was just about sorted the way we needed it to be, and then we could take what we had still held up and take them and put them wherever they needed to be. And it was getting towards dusk. It was probably an hour to dusk. And all of a sudden, Merlin just rides through the whole bunch of what we've got held up and just scatters it, just blows it over top of all of us. Just scatters everything everywhere. And he's whipping and hollering and crashing and this and that. And then, we lost about everything. And he says, well, let's go home. I said, what? He says, yeah, we're done. I said, okay. And so we're trotting home. So, we just aborted the entire mission. And we're trotting home. Finally, I got brave enough. I said, why'd we do that? Why in the hell did we about had it all done? Why'd you just crash through everything and just blow everything off? And this and that. He says, well, we were just about done, and I realized that you boys don't have anything to do tomorrow except fix fence. I didn't want you to have to do that, so tomorrow we can come back and gather those all back up and sort them up and do what we were going to do today. So that was his version of the world. He didn't want us to have to fix fence, so he just wrecked up the whole deal so that we could do it again tomorrow. That's always tickled me.